Scream Along a Joe there, the Moontrekkers and Night of the Vampire. John Leyton with us today on Original Masters. Now, we've had an example of Joe Meek screaming at the end of a record, but Joe Meek singing was something entirely different. I mean, apparently, he'd been a choir boy in his early days in Gloucestershire, but, you know, when he actually recorded demos of these songs, he was vocally, I think, John, it's fair to say, tone deaf. I mean, how many of these things did you hear in sort of unworked state?
Yeah, I actually have heard Joe singing, and it gave me encouragement because, you see, I was an actor and I wasn't really sure whether how it was going to work out for me as a singer. And when I heard Joe sing, I thought, oh, that's because he really wasn't very good. Yeah, I think he was certainly in terms of singing. He couldn't hold a song. He couldn't. He had trouble pitching, and I suppose, as you say, it was. If not tone deaf, certainly semi-tone deaf.
Well, we can work out whether it's a semitone or a quarter tone or whatever. I'm going to actually play a few seconds of that. Not too many seconds, or I think we'd lose all our audience. But this is Telstar, as the idea came to Joe and as he recorded it over an old Jeff Goddard backing track. Here we go. Say one can't get too much of a good thing, you know. There, Joe Meek singing Telstar for us. John Leyton, what do you make of that?
Well, I'll give the boy more echo. Oh, dear. Well, there you go. I mean, I think that illustrates that the singing was best left to others. Well, I think that was wonderful.
And needless to say, of course, apart from Jeff Goddard singing some backing vocals over it, Telstar was an instrumental in the end.
I'm very glad it was.
Yeah. Tell me, you know, after that stage in 62, when Telstar became the first British pop group record to make #1 in America, things really escalated for him, and I think at that stage there was almost a perceptible change in his personality too as the pressure increased. I mean, tell me about that time.
Yes, you see, I always... And I got on very well with Joe, and he was always very pleasant to me, and whether it was because... I mean, I didn't actually go knocking on Joe's door and say, Mr. Meek, I think I can sing, could you give me a recording test because I'd like to be a recording star. I actually sort of went to him from a kind of a different angle in that I was already sort of partially established as an actor, having sort of been in a television series for Granada, and I had a manager at the time, Robert Stigwood, who arranged for me to record with Joe. I mean, I had to do a recording test. He had to hear me sing, and I had to be acceptable in those terms. But I guess it was a slightly different association in my case than perhaps other singers that recorded for Joe, and therefore I always saw... I mean, I liked him immensely, and I always remember Joe as somebody that, and this probably sounds like a contradiction, bearing in mind his unfortunate end, but I always saw him as somebody that laughed at adversity. I mean, we used to spend many hours laughing in his studio, and I used to mess around quite considerably with the lyrics, and sort of... I'd be changing lyrics or making them up as I go along, and they would probably have some sort of twist, or certainly lyrics I couldn't mention over the air. But whereas I understand if other artists had done that, he would have come storming in and said, "How dare you waste my time," or whatever. But I had a very good relationship in that way with Joe. I mean, I got on with him very well. But I do understand that he had a pretty terrible temper. And I understand that he gave other artists a pretty rough time. The only time I ever actually saw that temper faintly rise was he used to get occasionally upset or cross with a member of the band when I was there, because they weren't playing quite the right thing that he wanted. But that was nothing out of the normal, and it was nothing sort of over the top. So I suppose, regrettably, in terms of Joe's temperament, I never experienced the bad side of it, although undoubtedly he did have a bad side of it, because so many people have told me how difficult he could be. So it's interesting that it never occurred with me. I mean, I remember Joe fondly, and as I say, when he met his end, I mean, I was actually in America. So I think, from what I can gather, actually, I think the last time I recorded with him was, I think, in 1963. Certainly, yeah, I'm sure it was 63. And I think that whatever was troubling him accelerated from the year 63 to the time he died, or he killed himself in 67. So I think there was quite a sort of accelerated deterioration within those 4 years.
Well, we're going to hear another one of John Leyton's own records now, Sunless Is She. I think we've got a dedication to go with this one, John.
Oh, yes. I would, because I think we've got a birthday coming up, haven't we?
Indeed, yeah. Not just your own.
Not just my own, but it's a lady who I've been going out on tour on the Solid Gold Rock and Roll show with Marty Wilde and Joe Brown, and there's a lady that I've met several times at the various venues, Sheila Weiberg, and I would like to dedicate this to Sheila, because she's such a very nice person, and she's very loyal to me, and she's got a birthday, so happy birthday, Sheila. Here's Sunless Is She for you.
From John Leyton to Sheila Weiberg and Carlisle, and John with us now, and time growing short as it ever does in these programmes once we get talking about some of the great artists as we do. And obviously, John, by the time that Joe did die, you were out in the States making your name as a movie actor, and but news like that travels very fast.
Yeah, I went out to the States in '64, actually, on a film called Von Raun's Express, and then I stayed there. I lived over there and worked over there in film and television as an actor, and it did travel very fast. And you must remember that, as I was saying earlier, in the last time I saw Joe was probably '63, and at that time he was a reasonably stable person. I thought he was. I mean, he had his moments, like we all do. But when I heard of his death, I was very saddened. But when I heard the manner of his death, I just couldn't believe it. I just found it quite extraordinary that he could have done what he did, because one must remember, as sad as it is, and we're here talking about Joe, and Joe has undoubtedly become a legend in the recording business, one mustn't forget the fact that he also took somebody else's life, and one's heart must, one's feelings must go out to the family, that family who lost somebody as a result of Joe's temperament or whatever. But yes, the manner of Joe's death was, I still can't believe it today that he did or could have done what he did, and it was quite shattering. And as I say, at the time, I mean, time is a great healer, but I often think of those days back at the 304 Holloway Road studio, and the fun that I had there, making so many records and laying so many tracks down with Joe at the helm there, and the laughs we had, and the fact that he ended up doing what he did. I can only assume, as I said earlier, that in the last 4 years of his life, there must have been emotional turmoil beyond belief, and what developed that or what triggered it, it's not for me to say. But all I can say is it is and was a very sad moment.
And I think that Joe Meek, obviously a very tormented figure, but if few people deserve to be called genius in the world of pop music, Joe is certainly one of them. And great to have John Leyton with us today, paying tribute to the man. John Leyton, many thanks.
My pleasure.